let's think about this. These are people who, in Jerusalem, have the temple of God. This is the place where they go to worship God. This is the place. It's not like here in the United States where you have a church here and a church there and a church everywhere, all of that. You have one place. You have the temple. Now, they'll set up synagogues eventually, but right now they have one place. They have the temple. This is where you go to worship God. And that's fascinating because in their idolatry, where do they worship their idols? Yeah, wherever they have the idol at. They tend to put them on high hills, green trees, low places, homes, fields, valleys. It almost seems like they have them everywhere, right? Yeah, well, anywhere they think there is a God that needs to be worshipped, right? And like I said, Jeremiah's condemnation of idolatry is replete. I mean, it's just throughout the book. And it's so frustrating because can they not see idolatry and God worship and understand what they're doing? And, you know, when you look around, just for the example again, the United States, we don't have idolatry like they did then. But there certainly are a lot of places where people go to worship. Why can we not, I'm sorry, that's not the right way to phrase it. Do we not have problems of idolatry in our society? That's a negatively worded question, so it's a badly worded question. Is idolatry a problem here? Yeah. Okay. How can we tell?
Anytime you put anything before God.
Okay, anytime you put anything before God. What is, I mean, yes and no.
It could be hunting, it could be fishing, camping, it could be anything.
Okay, so you're talking about actions, right? Your actions. And idolatry in the Old Testament would be them having an actual object, going to that object and saying, this is my God. God, you will provide for me. You will protect me. You will. Now, they did, for example, hunting and fishing in the Old Testament. They usually did it as a way of life, of providing for their families. Hunting and fishing in itself is not bad. Yeah, I don't want to go down the road of wastefulness, and you're right, though, Denise. Obviously, wastefulness is not something that a good hunter would engage in. So let's stay on the side of good hunters.
Money is a big one.
They weren't necessarily hunt for trophies, but they didn't. They hunt.
Well, they would do both. They would hunt for trophy and food, and we've got both today. And money can be a god, and when you get to the New Testament, Jesus makes it very clear that idolatry, money, is a god to some people. But we have to be careful. Is hunting itself idolatrous? No. Well, of course you use money for hunting. That's part of the process, or at least it is in our society.
It's not necessarily evil.
Neither is
No.
money.
Right. Evil is not money. I'm sorry. Money is not necessarily evil. It is an item.
When you become all consumed in making money or fishing and hunting to get the best trophy or whatever, that's when it's wrong.
Right. And, you know, it kind of goes back to what Gentry said, which is, in my mind, it's not just coming before God. That's part of it. But it is the idea of, this tells me how to run my life. So if I live my life so that hunting is the end goal of whatever it is that I'm doing, or fishing is the end goal, or sports is my end goal, or movies are my end goal, or TV watching is my end goal, those things are running your life. And people will talk nostalgically because we don't have this problem anymore, but they'll talk about how they would, just as children, race home after school to turn on the TV to catch their favorite show, right? They couldn't wait, and it's not the television, is it? It's the show. They didn't race home to watch the TV when the sports are on or the newscast is on, unless that's their idol. But we have this habit, and it's not just children, that's just the example that comes to mind. We have this habit of this fixation of this thing that says, I have to, for example, go to work. Some people, I have to go to work so that I can make money. Money is the goal. Now, for other people, I have to go to work so I can make money so that I can go fishing. Or I have to go to work so I can make money so that I can go shopping. And that's different from, I go to work so I can pay my bills. But sometimes even bill paying can be the idol. And we have to be careful about this because, remember, it's the thing that tells me how to live my life. We definitely create the idols. God doesn't give us idols and say, Scott, worship the idol. He doesn't want that at all. He wants us to follow him. And, I'm sorry?
And only him.
Yeah, only him, right, yeah. And so things like work, obviously he made us for good works. Work is something that we are created for. But work is not the end goal. God is. And so understanding these things about idolatry can be really challenging because we can read about idols in the Old Testament. Say, man, those guys are so foolish. But we need to be able to switch it around and look at how politics can become our idols, or social media can become our idols, or Hollywood stars can become our idols. And we need to be understanding that this is their temptation as well. We need to understand that this is why they engaged in that idolatry. Even as they're worshiping God, they go to Jerusalem to worship, and then they go out into the field and worship the Baal or the Asherim. Because this is kind of how their society works. And they too would have that segregation. I have my worship of God at Jerusalem temple. I go out to field and I worship the other God. And that worked for them, but it doesn't work for the real God. And that's the significance that we need to grasp. The real God says, what you're doing is foolish. I saw a hand over here, Tom.
And I was looking at, because Israel always looked at their neighbors sometimes and said, well, look how they're doing business, and it
Oh, yeah.
seems to be okay. And they're using that for their definition of how they want to live their life all of a sudden, instead of,
Well, it is a
putting
challenge.
God first. I mean, it's a challenge. We're in this world, not of the,
Right.
And that's our challenge. I mean, we're no different. Because we see something over there on, oh, is the grass greener over there?
Oh, yeah. That still goes on today. I saw a video today of.
And they got in that trap, because that's a trap door.
Uh-huh.
And because they looked and they says, well, nothing's happening to them, but
That's not how we measure things, is it?
no.
I watched a couple videos. One in China that they showed. This is how Japan. Sorry, they were showing how they worshipped in Japan, and they're like, we should do the same thing here in the United States. We should do the same thing here in the United States. No, not necessarily. And then I watched another video where this huge auditorium. You think it was a stadium, and it's filled with people, and they're like, these must be true Christians because of how many people are here. Is that how we measure true Christians? No. And the answer, of course, is no. So the grass is greener, but that doesn't mean that the grass is good for eating, right? And we need to be careful about that, especially since I don't eat grass. Let's get into some text. Let's look at what God says here. Jeremiah chapter 10. And this is really interesting because Jeremiah brings it out beautifully, or God through Jeremiah does this. Chapter 10, starting in verse 1, I'm going to read through verse 5. Hear the word that Yahweh speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says Yahweh, learn not the way of the nations, Tom, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens. Now that's very interesting. Have you seen all the things that are going on in the world today? Don't look at those things to figure out truth about God. Nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the peoples are vanity. What's another word for customs of the people?
Tradition.
Yeah, traditions, habits, society. The bulletin, here's a word that's not in the scripture, society. How would you describe society? The way people do things, right?
Yeah.
Right. The customs of the peoples, vanity. He's going to go on here and tell us why. Verse 3. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. Well, they don't do good or evil, so there's nothing wrong with them, right? What's the problem with an idol? What does Jeremiah lay out here with an idol? Yeah, they're useless. What do? Nothing. And what good is a God that does nothing? Yeah. In fact, this is worse than nothing, because how does the idol come into existence? Man makes it. And that means if we are thinking about this, we can make idols today. They don't need to be made of wood.
Because we make ourselves God in that sense.
Yes. I'm in control. I get to decide how my God operates. That God becomes me. And I just love the foolishness in verse 5. Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field. They cannot speak. They have to be carried. They cannot walk. I mean, we know that these statues are not really God or gods. And yet people would bow down and worship them, and people do that to this day. And they will use crafty words to try to justify it. And this is really dangerous because mostly the Catholics, they'll have little statues of God or Mary or saints that they will bow down and worship. Is it the statue? And the answer is no, the statue can't do anything. Is it the thing behind the statue? Because these people knew that their statue can't do anything. The idea behind the statue, that's my real God. Can that do anything? And the answer is no. And that's important because they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. They do nothing. And when we talk about, for example, sports, or we talk about fishing or hunting or work or money, those things can't really do anything either, can they? It's what we do with them that turns them into whether they're a god or not. And what control we allow them to have over our lives. And again, those things are in themselves are not evil. Let's look at the situation here that Jeremiah gives us. Is a tree evil? Is silver or gold evil? Is turning a piece of tree into a statue evil? Is having gold and silver fastened to it evil? None of those things are evil. And yet, when we turn and we say to this thing, you control my life, suddenly it becomes evil. And that's true. It does, because it doesn't do what we have said that it does. That's the issue with idolatry on one side. Now the other side is this. Who created us? Who created the universe? And if I turn to a false god, a false idol, and I say, you have power and the real God does not, what have I done?
Dishonored God.
Yeah, you've dishonored God, the creator of everything.
The creator of that tree.
Yeah, the creator of the tree itself, the creator of you, the creator, yes, you have dishonored him immensely.
There's another point too. If you're saying something like, well, this is a God, you're lying to yourself and to anyone else who hears you.
Yes.
And who's the father of lies?
Yeah, there, as we talked about last Sunday night, you're never more like the devil than when you're lying. As Jeremiah continues in verse 6, he says, there's none like you, O Yahweh. You are great, your name is great in might. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your due, for among all the wise ones of the nations and in all their kingdoms, there is none like you. Now he just got done showing how foolish it is to have an idol, and then he turns around and he says, there's none like God. Why is that? Well, because even the wisest person is nothing like God himself. And he's going to elaborate on that in verse 8. They are both stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Beaten silver is brought from Tarshish, gold from Uphaz. They are the work of the craftsman in the hands of the goldsmith. Their clothing is violet and purple. They're all the work of skilled men. But Yahweh is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. At his wrath, the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure his indignation. There's a huge difference between an idol who does nothing and the God who makes all this and controls all this. All right, moving forward, chapter 11. This one is very important for us, especially today. Going back to the idolatry really quick. Worshipping God is part of who we are and what we're supposed to do. But we need to make sure that we're not worshiping God and worshiping idols. All right, Jeremiah chapter 11, the broken covenant. Chapter 11, verse 1. Hear the word that came to Jeremiah from Yahweh. Hear the words of this covenant and speak to the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. You shall say to them, thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel. Cursed be the man who does not hear the words of this covenant that I commanded your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt from the iron furnace, saying, listen to my voice and do all that I command you, so shall you be my people, and I will be your God, that I may confirm the oath that I swore to your fathers, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as at this day. Then I answered, so be it, Yahweh. And Yahweh said to me, proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. Hear the words of this covenant and do them. For I solemnly warned your fathers when I brought them up out of the land of Egypt, warning them persistently, even to this day, saying, obey my voice. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but everyone walked in the stubbornness of his evil heart. Therefore, I brought upon them all the words of this covenant, which I commanded them to do, but they did not. All right, so when God brought them up out of Egypt, he gave them a covenant. How is that covenant usually phrased or worded? How do we reference it?
Bearing all things, believing all things, hoping all things, and enduring all things.
No, that's not how we do that.
Love never ends.
No, that's not the covenant that we're talking about.
That's the one that never ends.
When did he give them this covenant? Mount Sinai. Yeah, you got to be louder, Denise. You got to be louder for us. Mount Sinai, what covenant was that?
10 Commandments.
10 Commandments. Law of Moses. That's the commandments that he's talking about here. And when God gave this to the people of Israel, they are descendants of Abraham. That's how they measured themselves. We are the 12 tribes. And God gave the covenant to the 12 tribes, not to Abraham, but to the 12 tribes. And God expected them to keep that covenant. They're breaking that covenant. They've been breaking that covenant since God gave it to them at Mount Sinai. And he gave them that covenant. And he says in verse 4, so shall you be my people and I will be your God. But that never came true because while he was their God, or I'm sorry, they were his people, he was never their God. We just looked at idolatry. How many gods did they have?
Many.
How many fingers do you have, plus how many toes, plus how many ears, and how many noses, and all of that, right? Jeremiah was called to proclaim faithfulness to this covenant. Because part of that obedience is, if you do what I say, I will bless you. What happens if you don't?
You're cursed.
God is very clear. You will be cursed. I will curse you, he says. And I will drive you out of this land. In verse 5, I swore to your fathers to give them a land flowing with milk and honey as at this day. That's the land that they lived in. Did God keep his promise? He did. Which means if they break the covenant, what happens?
They're being cursed.
God keeps his promise, they will be cursed. And that's the warning that Jeremiah is supposed to be giving to this people. Now the problem is, verse 8, they did not obey or incline their ear. What instead happened?
Gonna do what they're gonna do because that's what they wanna do.
It's not just they do what they want to do because that's what they're going to do. Everyone, they all did this. And it wasn't, well, my neighbor's doing it. And this is a decision that each one of them had to make. Every one of them decided, my evil heart comes first. And they didn't sit back and say, I got an evil heart. I'm going to do what I want to do. But they did say, I want to do what I want to do. And that is the evilness. When it comes to Christianity, what kind of warnings do we have? Do we have this kind of covenant where if you're faithful, God will bless you, and if you're faithless, God will curse you? No, we don't.
When we're unfaithful, the Lord remains faithful.
You're right.
He won't deny himself.
You're right. When we're faithless, God is still faithful. But part of that faithfulness is the fact that what happens if we are faithless? What does he warn us about?
You get cut off.
Yeah, being cut
Here,
off.
I'll pray for you when you deny me. Come back. The rooster crowed 3 times, but he said, Peter, do you love me?
Yeah, that was for
Feed my
Peter.
sheep.
That was for
Peter, do you
Peter.
love me?
That was for Peter.
Feed my sheep.
Michael,
Peter, do you
Michael,
love me?
Michael, you're being disruptive. God's warning for his people. Turn over to the book of Hebrews. The writer of the book of Hebrews makes a great case at the beginning of chapter 1 through into chapter 2. And he brings up the fact that Jesus is superior to angels, and thus we must listen to Jesus compared to angels. Jesus is way more important than angels. By the way, the law of Moses was given through angels. So after the writer makes the case that Jesus is superior to angels, when you get into chapter 2 of Hebrews, he says this in verse 1. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. What happens if something drifts?
Gets lost.
Buried sometimes if it's snow.
It's off course.
Yeah, you guys are using nautical terms, which is great. It's not anchored, it's going to go off course, and that's wonderful. We're in the period of snow right now. And snow drifts. What happens with a snow that drifts? Yeah, it covers things, but it's going to move from where it's supposed to be to where the wind blows it, and when the wind's done blowing it, it's just going to abandon it. It's going to leave it there. You have these big old piles of snow in places where the snow ought not to be, and it ought not to be there because that's not where it fell. And that's really significant when you think about something drifting. Where it is not where it ends up. As the snow is moved, as the boat is moved, it's moved to where it ought not to be. Whereas when it first is, that's where it should be. And so the writer here, speaking of Jesus, says that we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. What's the it? What we have heard. What have we heard? Verse 2. For since the message declared by angels, this is the law of Moses, proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution. We covered that a little bit. What happens if you're faithful? You're blessed. What happens if you're faithless? You're cursed. Every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution. How shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? We have something that is greater than the law of Moses, something that's greater than what was given through angels. Why? Because it came through the Son. And the Son is superior to the angels in every way. And if it was given through the Son, and the Son is superior to angels, and if what was given by angels received just retribution, what happens if we neglect what the Son has said? Verse 3 continues, it was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard. We have a word for those guys. What is that? Witnesses, the apostles specifically. It was attested to us by those who heard. That's witnesses. They heard something. They are the apostles. Verse 4. While God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles and by gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. Yeah, well, that's a different issue. Now, when we think about these things, when we talk about these things, under Jeremiah, God had given Israel a covenant. And that goes back to Moses, of course. If you're faithful in the covenant, I'll bless you. If you're faithless, I will curse you. When we get to the New Testament, we don't have blessings and cursings. We have a God who has told us that I love you so much that I sent my son so that your sins will be forgiven. And if you confess your sins, I will be just and remove all unrighteousness from you. What happens if we abandon that covenant? What happens if we decide that we're going to go to a different God, or we're going to ignore that covenant? Yeah, did you notice that the Hebrew writer never told us? He leaves it to our imagination to figure out, doesn't he? That's if we drift away, right? This is the punishment for those who abandon the law of Moses. What do you think happens to us? Leaving Christ leaving the law of Moses is so serious. What is God going to do in the days of Jeremiah?
They'll lose their land,
They're going to lose their land. What else?
take them into slavery.
They're going to go into slavery for 70 years. What else? What happens to their kings? They're deposed. Puppet kings are put in place. What happens to the temple? It's destroyed. Where are they to worship God?
They have no place in.
In fact, God will tell them that they will worship not gods. They're doing that already, right? But that's how serious it is for God in the days of Jeremiah. Now, it took a long time to get here. God didn't just say when Moses came down off the mountain, okay, that's it, we're done, we're going to scrap this and we're going to start all over. He did, actually. And Moses pleaded with him, and God said, all right, we'll do this again. And we'll do this again, and we'll do this again, and we'll do this again. It took hundreds of years between Moses and the faithlessness then to the days of Jeremiah for God to say, I can't do this, and I quit. You want to worship your idols? Fine. 70 years in captivity. Go worship your idols. Let me know how that works out for you. There's a reason why when Jesus comes, the Jews should look at what Jesus did and say, this is the way that we should do things, because what Jesus provides is so much superior to the law of Moses. But that writer of the book of Hebrews writes what he writes because even in those days, even when there were signs and wonders and miracles, even when there were witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus, people were still leaving Christianity. What do you think happens? The writer doesn't tell us. It certainly isn't good. All right, moving forward. Chapter 12 of Jeremiah. Look at verse 5. Chapter 12 of Jeremiah, verse 5. If you've raced with men on foot and they have wearied you, how will you compete with horses? And if in a safe land you are so trusting, what will you do in the thicket of the Jordan? For even your brothers and the house of your father, even they have dealt treacherously with you. They are in full cry after you. Do not believe them, though they speak friendly words to you. I have forsaken my house. I have abandoned my heritage. I have given the beloved of my soul into the hands of her enemies. My heritage has become to me like a lion in the forest. She has lifted up her voice against me, therefore I hate her. And he'll go on. What is God saying here? Yeah, God is mad. He is beyond mad. He is trying to use every word that he can to describe just how mad he is. And Jeremiah has asked the question, how long is this going to take place? And God's response is verse 5 and 6. You know, running against men is hard. How are you going to compete with horses? Can a man compete with racing against horses? And we know how foolish that is. Who's going to win? How often? Every time. What if we lengthen the distance? Horse is always going to win because they're faster than we are. What do you think happens when we fight against God? Even in the days of Jesus, men, will think that they can win against God. Turn to Psalm 2. Psalm 2 is a messianic psalm. Talks about Jesus. Starting in verse 1, just look at the attitude. And this attitude is not just in the days of the psalmist. It's not just in the days of Jeremiah. It's not just in the days of Jesus. This is an attitude of many nations throughout history. And nations don't seem to learn. Look at what he says, Psalm 2, verse 1. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. What is mankind plotting to do? I'm going to overthrow God. I don't need God. Is that stated in our world today? Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting in verse 2, against Yahweh and against his anointed. This psalm is about, Jesus calls him the Father. This is about God and the Son, Jesus, the anointed one. Verse 4, this is God's response. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Does anyone know what derision means? Ridicule, scorn. Yeah. Derision. He just looks at them and says, you guys are so foolish. Verse 5. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. Yahweh said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. By the way, the writer of the book of Hebrews quotes that in chapter 1 there in book of Hebrews. Verse 7 again. I will tell of the decree. Yahweh said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. How strong is a potter's vessel? What happens to it when you dash a potter's vessel? Is it hard? No, it's pretty easy. What happens when you get struck with a rod of iron? How does that feel? Anyone know? Yeah, I like Mike's response. My imagination tells me that would hurt a lot. Verse 10. Now therefore, O kings, be wise. Be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve Yahweh with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. For his wrath, whose wrath? The Son's wrath. His wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Is it possible to overthrow God? That's part of what makes God God, right? And we're not. And yet, mankind, to this day, consistently says, I don't need Jesus, I don't need God. I can do this on my own. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Tom. The world is, sarcastically, the world is so much better, right? It's not. But it's really interesting to think that God says this to a people who are busy worshiping idols and God at the same time. And I say this to caution us because here we've gathered today for a specific purpose, to worship God. And I'm grateful, I'm glad you're here. The caution is we don't want to end up being a people who worship God on Sundays and other gods Monday through Saturday. Because that's one of the things that Israel was guilty of.
And one thing is, the first commandment is for the 10 Commandments for Israel was have one God.
Yep.
Our commandment is love your God with all your heart, with all your soul.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, what's the difference there? Nothing.
Yep. Yeah, the command that the greatest command as asked of Jesus and his answer, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. That's from the Old Testament. That's not new. It's not like, oh, mind blowing. I never thought of that before. No, that was something that God commanded Israel to do from the beginning, that God commanded mankind to do from the beginning. And the second, as Jesus will say it, is like the first, love your neighbors yourself. That also is found in the law of Moses. These are not unique to Jesus. This is unique to God.
Exactly.
All right. Great class. We will pick up Jeremiah chapter 13 next week, Lord willing. Thank you.